My name is Venki. I'm from AT&T. One question I have is, if you see the aspirations of software engineers coming from school and ask them what do you want to become in 2 years, they would say we want to become a manager. So if you look at all the innovation that we're talking about, where do you see the architects or the business analysts or the subject matter expertise, those kinds of competencies being built, and how do you see that being advertised by the big guys to make sure that we have ample architects, ample subject matter experts, and not just people managers?
Jerry, you want to take it?
Yeah, I think clearly those companies which do not have compensation and career path policies to encourage those who are good at technical work, they are going to disappear. Every one of us who's thought about this has worked very hard on creating a career path for a programmer to become a systems designer, to become an architect, to, I think we call them later on, distinguished fellow or something. And they keep getting both money and options comparable, sometimes more than they would if they became a project manager, program manager, and regional manager kind of stuff. So that signal is very important. And all companies that I know, good companies, are concerned about this and have set up programs to make sure that the career paths encourage people to stick to core technical expertise if that's just what they want to do, and not just get tempted into becoming supervisory managers and lose out on the technical stuff that they can bring to the company.
In fact, the last software engineer I had a career counseling session with said, I'm just working with you for 2 years. After that, I want to become a disc jockey. So I hope there are people like that still left. I'm sorry, I see a lot of hands going up, but we just have to close the session. I'm going to ask the last question that came through writing and ask each of the panelists to comment on that as probably their closing remarks. The question really is that India has kind of established itself as the outsourcing capital of the world. When and how can it become the innovation capital of the world? Leo?
I think, again, as I said, the intrinsics are already there because this industry has created a set of capabilities and skills which already exist to actually drive innovation. My view is it's a mindset of risk-taking. It's not an issue about building new capabilities. So the good news is those capabilities exist. They are embedded. We just need to take the risks, and I think the innovation will follow.
Subedar? My sense is, first of all, there won't be any innovation capital in the world. So we need to step down from that high horse. There will be many innovation centers in the world which will be connected to each other. The question is, would India be an equal node in that connected ecosystem or not? And for that, first of all, we require more diversity at the ground level. We need a lot more right brain thinking, multidisciplinary thinking. We need to break away from an adaptive mindset at a social and educational level, higher investment and risk orientation. Belief in good education. And we are very good as a country in trivializing things. So while there will be a lot of educational institutions will come up, but we really do not understand what is good education all about. And more depth in research will be required. Our people need to be in love with ideas, not with technology. iPod will come from the company which has the technology, but also they love music and they want to listen to good music. So we need to have that love for ideas far more than anything else. Finally, I think India has to be a far more immigration-friendly country. We need, if you look at historically the innovation, again, I'm using the word capital here, but in a different sense, places where innovation has happened historically through medieval times, modern times, have been places which have attracted talent globally, where people from all over the world have come to work and live out of. Only when Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, Madras, and Bangalore invite and encourage people from other countries to come and settle down, then only we can be innovative enough to be good enough for the world.
Jerry?
The two big inhibitors for, particularly in the IT industry so far, have been that we haven't had credible betas in India itself. The credible beta sites have always been in the US. And that's changing. As Indian telecom is growing at the pace it is, as Indian banks are getting as aggressive as they are, we are getting very good beta sites within India itself. So that gives me great hope. The second thing that really worries me is that what has been good for us is that we basically learn by rote, right? Which means we learn algebra, calculus, etc. by rote, and which is very good. It disciplines us, unlike many other soft states where the educational system is soft, they don't learn their maths as well as we do. But in learning by rote, we also lose creativity. In fact, sometimes I think this SEI CMM5 may be a curse, because it is so excessive in discipline and documentation. It doesn't allow for our being able to get beyond that. And this is a very difficult problem to wrestle with. One solution may be, and I think the more I listen to Subrota's impassioned plea, I think that might be it. Rather than looking at it as India innovating, can we be part of a hybrid transnational process? And you're talking about this immigration thing. One of the most fascinating stories I was reading the other day was in 1935 or 36, whenever Hitler occupied Austria, a few Austrian Jews ran away from there, and they were on their way to Australia, and the ship stopped in Bombay, and one young Jewish guy got off. His name was Rudi von Leiden. He actually came from a very wealthy Jewish family, so they were actually allowed to use the title von, which usually they were not. And he is responsible for what we know as the Bombay School of Art. He was a great collector, great connoisseur, great art critic. So we have a Raza Taib Mehta Hussain Gade today. It's Rudi von Leiden. So one person, created that kind of sense of chemistry and catalysis, catalyzed the situation. So the more I hear you, the more I think we need to start thinking along those lines and be collaboratively creative rather than look at creativity as some kind of a national pride matter.
Thanks, Jerry. And just a few last words on innovation. I think I'll just end with what Kiran Karnik said yesterday, that innovation really springs when there is both adversity and diversity. Adversity, of course, is thrust on us by external as well as internal situations, which all of us have discussed at length over the last 3 days. Diversity, there is no shortage of. And I think as we go along over the next year or so, I think you'll find not only initiatives by companies, but also initiatives by the industry, spearheaded by NASSCOM, which will show you what is the extent of diversity that we really are looking at in this country. And I think, to conclude from what all the panelists have said and the wonderful questions that many of you have asked, I think we're all optimistic about the future. We know there are hurdles to overcome, and I know we have the collective strength to make that happen. But I think at the end of the day, we know we can succeed, and all the formats, all the formulae that we can really think about with all these years of experience, I'm sure will stand us in good stead. Yeah, and any other questions that you have, I think we can, please feel free to post them on the website. There are blogs still open, and we can promise you that we'll respond to you on all your questions. And if you need us to ask any specific person, we can ask that also. So thank you very much. And on your behalf, I'd like to thank all the panelists for what I think you'll agree has been a wonderful session. Thank you.